Fierce to Fathom is an episodic horror series created by Rail Studios, with the games coming out almost twice a year from July of 2021 to September of 2024. With the release of the first Fierce to Fathom in 2021, I was hooked. What started out as essentially a horror game demo with its first release blossomed into a series of promising stories, with these games mostly one-upping themselves with each subsequent release. The games center around viewer-submitted stories that are supposedly anecdotal, though being that this is the internet, the truth may or may not be a little stretched or straight up warped beyond recognition from time to time with varying degrees of success. And through some highs and lows and an admittedly rather formulaic gameplay loop, these are games that I am a rather big fan of. So given that the series has recently reached its conclusion as of a couple of months ago, I decided to revisit and rank all of the games according to my own opinion. Now please keep in mind that, as I just said, this is all my opinion. I likely have a take in here that you'll probably not completely agree with, and that's okay. If you wish to share an opinion that's different than mine, feel free to do it respectfully in the comments. I also just briefly wanted to thank you guys for how crazy of a year this has been for my channel. I was intending on getting this out earlier in the month, but I got rather sidetracked. So I wanted to give my thanks now while I can. I've been on and off doing YouTube ever since I was a kid, so coming up on like a decade now, but I only really half committed to this channel about 3 years ago. Partly just to make shit that I thought my friends would like, but also as a more creative outlet for myself. Now fast forward to like February of this year, and I was celebrating hitting 200 subscribers while doing gaming content at the time. And now at the end of the year, I have a little over 28,000, which is absolutely ridiculous. So truly, thank you all from the bottom of my heart for helping me turn my stupid little hobby into something that I get to share with way more people than I have any right to. So anyways, thank you all very much for watching, and let's get into the ultimate Fierce to Fathom ranking. The first Fierce to Fathom. I remember hearing about it a little bit after its release in July of 2021, and having just dropped a relative shit ton of money on a laptop at the time, I decided to check it out since, you know, I needed something free to play. And holy shit, this game worked for me. For those of you who have been around on the channel for a bit, you'll know that my greatest fear is home invasions, and this is a very straightforward home invasion story. You are Miles, a 14-year-old boy who is not only basically reverse cycling his sleep schedule, but is also currently home alone, hence the episode name. Throughout the episode, you do normal 14-year-old boy things like eat an entire lasagna, watch absurdist TV, do your homework, and sleeping an absolute shit ton. That is until, after waking up to get some water, you receive an image from outside of your house of someone attempting to enter it. Upon investigating, you decide to hide upstairs, after which the police roll along and the intruder flees out of a window. On my first playthrough though, I didn't realize that you had to wait for the police to show up, so I tried to bolt past the intruder and it didn't exactly go too well. Now, this game isn't as long as the rest of the chapters, and as such, it's lacking in a lot of the features and interactability that the later games will have, but with the context of it essentially serving as a demo for what is to come of the series, this is an extremely solid start for what will inevitably be. I think this entry is probably the one that commits the most to the realism aspect of it, as later down the line you can definitely tell when they're just a little embellished, but in contrast to some of the later games in the series, I appreciate its brevity. The story is very straightforward, and the game doesn't attempt to portray it in any other way for the sake of extending its runtime. This episode knows exactly what it wants to be, and it does a great job at portraying some solid scares for its runtime. A moment that stood out to me is when you're scarfing the lasagna down on the couch, and if you look in the background you can see a glimpse of the intruder. That shit is awesome. It had me super paranoid. But yeah, Fierce to Fathom, Home Alone gets a solid low A tier. Short, simple, and enticing the whole time you're playing it. You are Holly, a 19-year-old girl who is taking a detour to avoid traffic on the way home from a gaming convention. She makes a brief stop at a gas station and is warned about a potentially paranormal threat that literally never comes up, before having her car break down in the middle of nowhere. After hitchhiking her way to a motel, she meets the housekeeping, gets stalked through her window, consumes some roofie coffee, and discovers that the coffee wasn't real. A picture of you gets taken from outside of your window, and after a confrontation with your stalker, the owner of the motel comes in and rocks his shit off screen. I'm a little mixed on this episode. On one hand, it introduces the rather cool staple of the series in the form of a hot mic that is present during the hiding portions of the game, and overall I think most of it is rather well done, being a rather technical step up from the previous episode. Hell, now there's NPCs and interactable dialogue and voice acting in the game. It isn't just a line of text that is told to you during the game like the first one. It brings so much life to the story and the world of these games, and every other part is better for it. On the other hand, the ending does feel a little anticlimactic, even if it may have been something that actually happened. It just kind of leaves me wishing for a bit more. I also think that the epilogue explanation of the events does a little too much by trying to connect it to like a cult. Like I can definitely see trafficking. I get why that's an explanation, but a cult seems just a tiny bit out there. The moment where you notice somebody outside of your window also scared me pretty bad when I first played it. Like, holy shit, I hate that in the best way possible. This episode does also start a trend in the series of weird little details being mentioned for the sake of having weird, creepy, cool lore, while also having almost nothing to do with the plot. Most of the rest of the episodes have it worse, so it gets more of a pass here, but it is still a little weird to have a more paranormal thing mentioned at the beginning only to not be followed up on later. I get that it's probably just local lore as a result of the weird trafficking ring that exists in the area, but I honestly just don't think I really care for it. But nonetheless, I think this is a very solid chapter with an albeit rather anticlimactic ending. Unfortunately though, for Norwood Hitchhike, this is an opinion-based video, and I just so happen to personally enjoy the first episode more. It's not that this one is bad or anything like that, I just think I personally prefer the narrative of the first one compared to this one. Sorry, but for me personally, this one gets a high B tier. Fierce to Fathom Carson House is one that I admittedly didn't really care for too much at first, but upon subsequent replays, I've grown to enjoy it a bit more. You are Noah Baker, an 18-year-old whose father has connections in the real estate business. Through these connections, you earn a weekend job of house sitting for a Mr. Roy Carson, a local COO who recently got divorced from his actress wife. I know that's a random detail, I swear it's important. For a lot of this episode, it is a rather simple house sitting simulator. You've got to feed the dog, clean the owner's virus-ridden computer, do a little shopping, watch Berleezy on TV. But as you progress through the game, you get clued in little by little about a past relationship that the main character had, and furthermore, how your ex-partner may not exactly be a great person. After running into some classmates who state that she was in the area, a mysterious bouquet shows up at the door with no person attached. The power goes out, and after a little investigating, a keen eye will spot an intruder walking around the property. Further investigation on the cameras gives the intruder ample time to get inside of the house, revealing that she is none other than the toxic ex-girlfriend we were warned about prior. After a confrontation with the intruder, Noah flees the home, with the epilogue explaining that while she had already fled the building by the time the police showed up, she ends up being caught and sentenced due to the damning video evidence. Oh, and I guess she did meth too, or something. So, how do I like this one? Well, it's pretty good actually. I didn't like it at first because I had thought the inclusion of Kara, the intruder, was kinda out of nowhere, but that was pretty much entirely because I hadn't paid as much attention to the dialogue in the texts or with the school friends as much as I should have. I like how subtly the game foreshadows her later appearance. It makes it feel a lot more rewarding to go through the texts that are normally just interesting but not particularly relevant bits of world building. This game also starts a trend that I don't mind in this one, but in a later entry it becomes rather apparent, where the actual horror part of the game isn't super long. Hell, it's not long enough to make too long of an experience. So most of the game is just a rather calm and nice bit of doing a bit of house watching, which is fine. The game is only about an hour and the last 20 minutes are where the horror elements come in, so it's not like you're waiting forever for something to happen. But I also feel like the tidbits about the homeowner's divorce leading to fans of the wife stalking the house is a rather roundabout way of explaining about how Kara knows what house you're at. I understand why it's there, I just personally think it's a rather convoluted way of explaining something that is honestly rather negligible. And now, I do understand that it may very well be a part of a real story, hence why the detail is included, but honestly, I'd take all of these stories being real with a massive pile of salt, as sometimes these do have the qualities of a trust me bro Reddit story. Also, on top of the already weird details about the homeowner's divorce, the weird offhand addition of talking about the ex-girlfriend's drug addictions just feel a tiny bit like exaggerations that are added in an attempt to make the story more intriguing. And while that isn't an inherently bad thing, it does feel just a little bit silly for me personally. Nonetheless though, I still really enjoyed this episode, and as such, I'm gonna give this episode a high A tier, just above the first one. Also, holy shit, I forgot to mention something in the script, but I just had to say it. So when you're eating the pizza on the couch, the stupid munching sounds that play don't go away until all of the slices are gone. So what happened for me in my most recent playthrough is that I didn't finish the pizza because I went to go check out the bouquet stuff before that. So for almost the entire last third of the game, I had the fucking eating sound in my ear the whole time. It was pretty funny. We're still eating, by the way. Is it because I never finished that last slice of the pizza?
Maybe.
I didn't think I would need to fucking finish the slice before I got up. Oh my god, stop eating. Jesus Christ, let's go get the last slice before we do anything else. Okay, look, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. This is the best episode. If we were grading these based on how real they are, this wouldn't even be on the tier list. It would be below it if we're just using our critical thinking skills. But what this chapter lacks in realism, it more than makes up for by just being a simple yet genuinely compelling horror story. You are Jack Nelson, a park ranger who has been recently moved to the location of Ironbark State Park, which is known in the area for having recently entered news headlines for being the location of the disappearance of several kids. During your time in the park, multiple strange things happen, from a mysterious campsite being left unoccupied with somebody seemingly lurking nearby, multiple instances of people being seen or heard just outside of your tower, and the seeming disappearance of a hiker as you attempt to guide him on his way back. This all culminates with your character stumbling upon some sort of ritual, and upon attempting to collect photo evidence of it, the flash alerts the culprits of your presence, leading them to break into your tower, with you having to make a run for it back to your RV. However, upon reporting what happened, it is all simply dismissed as cabin fever. Yeah, this one is really fucking good. The atmosphere and setting of this game, being the most different out of all of the other games, makes this one stand out the most from every other episode. From the very beginning of the game, there are hints of things being very wrong, even if ever so slightly. It's not a detail that many pick up on their first playthrough of the game, but the weird tower technician, Silas, if that is even his real name, can be spotted at a diner in the very beginning of the game, complete with all of his cultist attire that he will adorn later. If you attempt to use the bathroom in your RV after the diner, the door will be jammed and you can hear something behind it, implying that he has hitched a ride with you to the park. And if you look closely in the background after you arrive, you can see him walking around in the woods when you first get to the park. These are very little details, but they go so far in making your environment feel truly deeply unsettling. There's just this constant feeling that you are always being watched, which I quite enjoy. The story in this one also just feels the most focused out of all of the games. With the settings of the rest of the stories being mostly restricted to classic home invasion type stories, there can be a lot of times where the games can feel like they stray a little bit off course for the sake of adding more content to the game, even if it may not exactly be conductive to the actual quality of the story. But in this chapter, just about everything feels like it actually belongs in this story. Even some of the sillier or more lighthearted random moments, like the cooking section, the Jacksepticeye cameo, or the random videos and games that are on the work computer. That's also another thing that I like. Even in the moments where the game isn't super horror oriented, it's just a straight up nice game to play and look at. Like there's some actually breathtaking scenery in this silly little indie horror game. And the addition of this game's companion, Connor, is a very good one in my opinion. Connor is such a nice breath of fresh air for the series, and all of his lines being voice acted helps with that so much. It's almost unfortunate that Connor is such a good addition because it makes the game's next attempt at a companion a lot lesser for the lack of voice acting, among other things. But back to the actual scares though, this game has some of the best tense moments in the series. The occasional whistling that can be heard in the distance, the odd figure lurking in the shadows, weaseling away into the darkness when spotted, the sheer oh shit moment when the cultists turn to acknowledge the flash of the camera, and my favorite of all, when the power goes out after the system update. Like I can't state how much I love these moments. It all just feels so deeply unsettling to me personally. There's just this constant feeling of vulnerability that I love in this episode. It's perfect. So as such, this entry gets a very strong S tier. It's by far my favorite of the series. Is this the night with the obligatory jump scare?
That was pretty funny.
I'm pretty sure it is. Check this out. I'm gonna go get my firewood and then I'm gonna turn around and I'm gonna get jump scared. I so fucking got me.
How?
It was loud. The last, oh man. The last entry in the Fears to Fathom series, and I hate to say it, but this is kind of sort of my least favorite. Like, by a lot. 23-year-old Sydney Harper books an Airbnb in Woodbury with her weirdo, dickhead, creepy friend Mike, who she may or may not have had a thing with in the past. The two of them run into this homeless guy at a pizza parlor who gets angry at them for not offering him a ride. And upon arriving at their Airbnb, they realize that the owner of it is lurking in the area nearby, frequently stopping by for seemingly meaningless tasks out of nowhere. The dynamic duo of Sydney and Mike play hide and seek, play with a Ouija board, go fishing, cook, and run into Rick, the Airbnb host guy, an obnoxious amount of times. After Mike attempts to make a move on you, he has to go to the aid of their other friend who was supposed to join them in the getaway, as she got stuck in the snow. The homeless guy from earlier shows up, which is fine, I guess, but he was also stalking you shortly after you arrived at the place, which like, how? Did he just find a fucking ride right after we denied him one? But after making some vague threats to you, Rick seemingly shows up and shoos him off because Sydney had texted him. Except, surprise, surprise, the man we've been seeing around the house isn't really Rick. I know, shocker. He breaks the ways in and out of the house, forcing us to play a game of hide and seek with him. Eventually, Mike and our actual friend show up, forcing the fake Rick to flee. Yeah, I just think that this game is noticeably weaker and less focused story-wise than the rest of the episodes. This is an hour and a half to 2 hour long game, and only the last 10 or so minutes are the actual horror part. This is something that I had criticized the third entry of this series for, but it could mostly get away with it because it's only about an hour in length, with the last third of the game being the horror part. However, in comparison, this game just feels a lot more aimless. It ends up feeling more like a house sitting simulator than the actual house sitting episode. Mike is also a considerable downgrade compared to the last game's companion, and while that may be intentional writing wise, as he is obviously written as such to lead you into thinking of him as the candidate for the antagonist, every single line of his is genuinely unbearable. I don't know how they managed to do it. I get the archetype of the creepy guy friend that doesn't know how to take a fucking hint. Trust me, those guys do exist, and I think taking that route with a female protagonist is definitely an interesting angle, but Mike's writing just kind of lacks a lot of subtlety, and as such, the 80% of the game where it's just him talking feels agonizing to be a part of. This is only exemplified by the fact that they had him voice acted for the very first portion of the game, but not afterwards. It's such a jarring decision in my opinion to make him not voice acted when Connor was so much better for having the voice acting. Like, I could honestly get by the writing, it's just that you have to read every single agonizing bit of cringe dialogue from him. This chapter in particular is also wrought with constant obnoxious jump scares. This is a tiny bit of an issue in most of the episodes, as a lot of them have at least one jump scare that feels out of place, but this one crams them in constantly in what feels like an attempt to distract you from just how little is actually happening. The inclusion of the homeless man as a side villain is also just bizarre and can actually straight up not make sense if you're not maxing out all of the dialogue in the game. Hell, on my first playthrough of the game, I didn't even know who he was when he showed up at the house, as I didn't get that interaction with him at the pizza parlor. I just thought he was Rick or something until he started accusing me of being rude earlier. This is also a weird criticism for one of these games, as it doesn't really happen in the rest of them, but this game is really weirdly buggy, at least in my experience. On my first playthrough, the car ride ended up getting stuck because I didn't press the correct dialogue option, and there's also weirdly a lot of opportunities to get soft locked in the game. Now, being that I played it on launch day, I just chalked it up to it being buggy because it had recently released. As such, I was hoping that this would be fixed during my most recent playthrough, but no, the game ended up glitching me into the secret basement room when the homeless guy showed up. God, I wish that I still had the footage because it's actually pretty ridiculous that a game this linear has this many soft locking glitches. Sorry if I'm being super negative here, but it's just really unfortunate to me that this episode doesn't land as well as the rest of the series when most of the other episodes are so consistently good. There's a lot of talent here, not only within the studio that made the game, but also within the cameos like fucking Queso and Berlizzi being here. But I almost wish that they had been saved for a potential later entry of the game if the developer ever feels like revisiting the franchise. If you like this episode, then by all means, feel free to enjoy it more than I do. I'm not here to change that. But as it stands for me personally, Woodbury Getaway is a mostly buggy mess of a game with an uninteresting plot, an even more unbearable companion character, and a sadly wasted antagonist. As someone pretending to own the house you're staying in order to attack you while you're alone is such an interesting idea and concept, but in execution is rather boring as his presence in the game is practically non-existent, which is saying something. Hell, 3 of the other villains in the episodes can only be occasionally spotted and heard of before their appearance. And even without any words, they already have more of a presence than Rick. It just feels like somebody submitted a story for this series, and the creator liked the idea, but since the previous episode was 2 hours, he felt pressure to make this one equal in length. And thus, we end up with an episode that feels rather bloated in comparison. I'm sorry, but I can't in good faith give this episode anything higher than a C tier. It just feels like a rather big step down for the rest of the series in my opinion. So this is where our final ranking stands. In last place, we have Fierce to Fathom Woodbury Getaway. In B tier, we have Norwood Hitchhike. In third place, we have Home Alone. In second place, we have Carson House. And in first place, and the only S tier, we have Ironbark Lookout. In any case though, thank you all very much for watching. I know it's been a minute since my last upload, and I swear to God I'm trying to fix that, but I hope to be back with another video soon for you. If you liked this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And if you have an opinion you wish to share, feel free to do so respectfully in the comments. I've got a bunch of other videos like this one out, so feel free to check out my other stuff. We also have a Discord server if you wish to join. I don't personally use it a whole lot, but I know some people talk in there, and they will always be the first to get the notification for the upload. Alright, anyways, enough yapping. Thank you all very much for this absolutely incredible year, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye!